Let's read chapter 2, verse 11 and 12 again. Therefore, remember that formerly you who were Gentiles by birth and called uncircumcised by those who call themselves the circumcision, which is done in the body by human hands. Remember that at that time you were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel, and foreigners of the covenants of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. Remember that Paul here is reminding the Gentiles of what is true of them in the past. And what was true of them in the past is true of every one of us in the past as well. And we saw these 5 things that were true of Gentiles before they became Christians. Firstly, they were Christless. Then they were stateless. They were friendless. They were hopeless. They were godless. 5 terrible things, but were true of all of us before we became part of God's family. But the thing I want us to see here today particularly is you notice what comes right at the beginning of verse 11 and right at the beginning of verse 12. Paul says, remember that formerly, remember the past. And then verse 12, remember that at that time. Paul says to remember. Now there are some things in the Bible that we're told to forget, such as when someone sins or does wrong against us, we're told to forget that. But here Paul says, remember. He says there's benefit in remembering what you were like in the past. Now for each of us that's going to be a little bit different. Some of us became Christians very early in age, or maybe such a long time ago, so that we don't actually really remember the experience of the beforehand. Some of us will do that all too clearly, with great regret at times. But whether it is just talking about these categories, or whether it is we can remember the experience of what that looked like, Paul says to us, remember. And so can we encourage you today to remember. Remember what you were like before Christ. Remember what you were like before you became a Christian. Because it's as we remember what we were like in the past that we can truly appreciate and that truly magnifies what is true of us today. Now we're going to have to wait until tomorrow to start seeing what that means and how that's unpacked by Paul. But remembering the past highlights the wonder of God's grace, the wonder of his saving work in us. It's actually as we remember the past that makes that more precious to us in the present. So remember.